Part 1, Einar. Sweden is often described as calm, orderly, and protected from the chaos seen elsewhere. Clean streets. Strong social systems. A country many people imagine as distant from organized street violence. Yet beneath that image, a different reality has been growing quietly for years. A conflict that does not announce itself until it explodes. Einar became the face of that contradiction. Einar was not an underground artist grinding for attention. He was famous while still a teenager. His songs reached the top of streaming charts. His face was everywhere. He was marketed as a prodigy, a symbol of youth culture, proof that a new voice from the suburbs could dominate the mainstream. The success came fast, faster than emotional maturity, faster than safety planning, faster than the ability to step away. Unlike many artists who borrow street language for aesthetics, Einar lived close to the world he described. His lyrics reflected real rivalries, real neighborhoods, real grudges. That authenticity brought credibility, but it also brought attention from people who do not see music as art. In that environment, fame does not remove you from conflict. It amplifies your visibility inside it. The turning point came during the year 2020. Einar was lured into a trap by rivals. What followed was not just a robbery. It was an act designed to destroy status. He was held against his will, stripped of symbols of success, and humiliated in a way that targeted identity rather than money. Images were taken. Those images were then shared publicly. In street culture, humiliation is not temporary. It becomes permanent once it is witnessed. The internet does not forget. The photos circulated beyond his control, reaching fans, rivals, and people who had never met him but now felt entitled to judge him. This was not physical harm meant to end a life. It was something different. A public dismantling meant to erase respect. The psychological damage was severe. Einar did not just lose privacy. He lost authority. In a world governed by perception, that loss can be fatal. Once an artist is seen as weak, the pressure to respond becomes relentless. Silence looks like surrender. Retreat looks like guilt. Every move becomes a test of credibility. Soon after, arrests were made in connection to the kidnapping. Even though Einar did not cooperate publicly, rumors began to spread. In criminal ecosystems, truth is less important than narrative. The label of informer carries its own sentence, regardless of evidence. Once that word enters circulation, it is almost impossible to remove. From that moment on, Einar lived in a state of suspended fear. Too famous to disappear. Too connected to be ignored. He moved between locations. He avoided routines. Yet total invisibility was impossible. His face, voice, and name were already public property. There were reports of a price placed on his life. Whether exaggerated or accurate, the idea alone was enough to change how every interaction felt. Trust narrows when survival is uncertain. Everyone becomes a question mark. Every shadow feels intentional. The final night came in a quiet residential area. A place associated with safety and distance from street disputes. Einar arrived with friends. Nothing appeared unusual. No confrontation. No warning. Just a moment where ordinary life paused. Two attackers were waiting. This was not chaos. This was preparation. They did not act in panic. They approached with purpose. The distance was close. The intent was final. There was no chance to escape, no opportunity for negotiation, no misunderstanding. Within moments, the life of a teenager who once symbolized promise was over. The location shocked the country. The age shocked the public. The method shattered the illusion that certain places are immune to organized violence. Sweden responded with disbelief and mourning. Political leaders spoke. Media coverage was extensive. Candles and flowers filled the site where Einar fell. Yet grief does not equal resolution. Questions remained unanswered. Who ordered it? Why now? Who benefits when a young voice is silenced? Einar's death was not random. It followed a clear sequence. Rise. Visibility. Humiliation. Rumor. Isolation. Elimination. Each step fed the next. His story exposes how modern violence no longer relies only on physical acts. Digital exposure can weaken someone long before the final moment arrives. His music changed after his death. Lyrics once heard as bravado now sounded like warnings. Lines about distrust, pressure, and inevitability took on new meaning. Listeners began hearing fear where they once heard confidence. Einar did not fail because of lack of talent. He failed because the system surrounding him offered fame without protection, attention without insulation, and authenticity without exit strategies. He was young in a world that does not forgive vulnerability. His case also forced Sweden to confront a deeper truth. Violence does not need chaos to exist. It can grow quietly inside stable societies, adapting to new tools and new stages. When reputation becomes currency, destroying reputation becomes a weapon. Einar was a teenager who became a symbol before he had a chance to become a man. His death marked a moment when the myth of Scandinavian immunity collapsed. Not with riots or wars, but with silence after a single, decisive act. Some will say he chose the life. Others will say the life chose him. The reality is more complex. Einar stood at the intersection of art, identity, and conflict, and once he was placed there, every step became dangerous. What part of Einar's story feels most unsettling to you, the speed of his rise or the precision of his fall? In the next part, the focus shifts from a cold Nordic courtyard to the bright hills of Los Angeles, where a single social media post quietly opened the door to another irreversible tragedy. Part 2, Pop Smoke. Pop Smoke moved faster than the system around him could protect. His voice was instantly recognizable. Deep, raw, commanding. Within a short time, he became the face of New York drill and then something bigger. Global attention followed. Fashion brands, chart success, and industry power surrounded a young man who had barely processed what fame meant. Los Angeles represented arrival. The hills symbolized distance from the streets that shaped him. A rented mansion in a wealthy neighborhood created the illusion of insulation. Gates. Views. Quiet streets. In that space, danger felt theoretical rather than immediate. The belief was simple. Success equals safety. Social media broke that illusion. Pop Smoke shared a moment of excitement online. A short story meant to show appreciation for a gift. No warning. No dramatic mistake. Just a brief clip posted without hesitation. The address label remained visible for seconds. That was enough. In the modern world, seconds are permanent. Most viewers saw luxury. A few saw coordinates. For a small group of teenagers watching from another part of the city, the post was not entertainment. It was information. They did not see an artist. They saw opportunity. Wealth displayed without protection. A temporary residence. A location that did not belong to him. To them, it looked unguarded. The plan formed quickly. There was no long history, no personal vendetta. Just impulse combined with access. In that moment, the internet acted as a guide. No surveillance. No insider. Just a screen and a decision. Before dawn, they arrived. The house was quiet. Inside, Pop Smoke believed he was safe. The place felt private. Secure. Removed from public reach. That belief ended when strangers entered without warning. There was confusion. Fear. No time to understand what was happening. The confrontation was brief. There was no extended struggle. No dramatic exchange. Violence unfolded quickly and without logic. In the chaos, Pop Smoke was struck, injured, and left without help. His life ended before the morning light reached the hills. What followed shocked even those familiar with street crime. The attackers did not leave with bags of valuables. They did not strip the house. They took a single watch. A luxury item worth far less than the life they destroyed. Later, that watch was sold for a small fraction of its value. A human life exchanged for an object that could not change anyone's future. When authorities identified the suspects, another shock emerged. They were teenagers. One of them barely old enough to understand consequences in a meaningful way. This detail forced an uncomfortable conversation. How does a generation reach a point where such acts feel possible? Not planned with ideology. Not driven by survival. Just impulse and opportunity. Pop Smoke became a symbol of that question. His death exposed how fame reshapes risk. Visibility creates distance from ordinary danger, but it also magnifies attention. The same platforms that build careers can also collapse security. In this case, the line between public and private did not exist. After his death, Pop Smoke's presence expanded. Music streams increased. His image appeared everywhere. Albums released later achieved massive success. The voice that had been silenced became louder than ever. Fame arrived fully only after he was gone. Listeners heard his songs differently. Lyrics about confidence and dominance gained a shadow. What once felt celebratory now felt fragile. His voice carried both ambition and absence. The industry responded with reflection. Artists became more cautious. Posts were delayed. Locations hidden. Security teams monitored online activity. The lesson spread quickly, but it arrived too late for him. Pop Smoke did not fail because he was careless. He failed because the environment changed faster than instincts. Social media encourages immediacy. Celebration. Sharing. It does not teach restraint under threat. Young success often lacks the discipline that danger demands. His story also challenged the idea of accidental tragedy. While the event was not orchestrated by powerful figures, it was not random either. It was the predictable result of exposure without protection. A chain reaction that began with a single tap on a screen. The gap between value and outcome remains disturbing. $2,000 gained. A life erased. Families shattered. A future eliminated. That imbalance is the core of the tragedy. Pop Smoke represented possibility. A new sound. A bridge between underground energy and mainstream reach. His potential was not theoretical. It was unfolding in real time. That is why his absence feels unfinished. He was not killed because of lyrics. Not targeted for affiliation. Not trapped by long-standing conflict. He was undone by visibility. In the digital age, visibility alone can be enough. His death stands as a warning without preaching. Fame does not replace caution. Wealth does not cancel risk. Privacy has become the most valuable form of protection, and it is often surrendered without thought. Pop Smoke left behind music that continues to move crowds. But behind the sound remains a quiet question. How many other lives are one careless post away from collapse? Which moment in this story feels most tragic to you, the mistake itself or how little it took to turn it fatal? The next part moves away from Hollywood and into a world where songs themselves are treated as declarations of war, and where a lunch break becomes a final act. Part 3, Tito Torbellino. Narco corridos do not exist in a neutral space. They are not just songs. They operate inside a system where lyrics are interpreted as loyalty statements. In that world, every name mentioned carries weight. Every verse can be read as endorsement or defiance. Music becomes a language understood by people who do not separate art from power. Tito Torbellino understood that world and still walked into it. He was born in the United States. He carried an American passport. Yet his fame was built south of the border, where his voice reached audiences living under constant pressure from organized groups. He sang stories about figures who controlled territories, about codes of honor, about survival in a violent economy. His songs were not abstract. They were specific enough to be recognized. Being successful in that genre meant visibility not only among fans but also among people who believed cultural influence belonged to them. When a singer praises one figure, others hear a challenge. Silence can be interpreted as distance. Praise can be interpreted as allegiance. There is no middle ground. Tito lived between two realities. In one, he was a performer with talent, charisma, and a loyal following. In the other, he was a voice that carried influence in places where influence is closely monitored. Fame offered opportunity, but it also placed him on a map he could not control. The city felt familiar. The schedule was routine. A meal with friends before a performance felt harmless. Daylight. A public place. Other people around. Those details usually suggest safety. In this environment, they meant nothing. The restaurant was busy. Families were eating. Staff moved between tables. The atmosphere was ordinary. No tension. No warning signs. That normality is what made the moment so destabilizing. Several men entered. Their presence shifted the air in the room. They were not there to browse or order. Their movements were deliberate. The doors were controlled. Positions were taken. Attention narrowed to one table. There was no announcement. No argument. No dramatic confrontation. The action was quick and final. In front of witnesses who could do nothing, Tito's life ended in seconds. The sound, the panic, the silence afterward became part of a memory that no one in that room could erase. The message was unmistakable. No place is neutral. Not a restaurant. Not a public space. Not a time of day associated with normal life. If a decision has been made, surroundings do not matter. Those responsible did not rush away in fear. They left with the confidence of people who believed consequences would not reach them. In environments shaped by intimidation, witnesses learn quickly what silence is worth. Statements were scarce. Details faded. Memory became selective. The investigation stalled. Official answers never arrived. The case joined a long list of unresolved deaths where everyone knows why but no one says how. Justice in these situations is not delayed. It is replaced by acceptance. Tito's death forced a difficult conversation about responsibility. Some asked whether singers who describe criminal worlds invite danger. Others argued that documenting reality is not participation. The line between reporting and promoting remains contested. Tito was not an organizer. He was not a commander. He was a performer. Yet influence does not require authority to be dangerous. In places where power is enforced symbolically as much as physically, a popular voice can feel threatening. His American citizenship offered no protection. Borders do not shield people when cultural impact crosses them. The assumption that safety can be switched on by geography failed him completely. After his death, concerts were cancelled. Security tightened. Fear spread through the genre. Yet the music did not stop. If anything, interest increased. Danger gave authenticity. Authenticity sold records. The cycle continued. Fans listened to his songs with new awareness. Lyrics once heard as storytelling now sounded like risk. Names felt heavier. References felt sharper. What had been entertainment became evidence of how closely art and danger had merged. Tito left behind family, friends, and a catalog that now carries the weight of consequence. His story illustrates how influence without protection can become exposure. He was not caught in the middle by accident. He was standing exactly where the system placed him. The central question remains unresolved. Can an artist describe a violent reality without becoming part of it? Is silence safer than expression? Or does silence invite a different kind of threat? Tito believed music could move freely across lines drawn by others. The response to his voice showed that those lines were guarded more tightly than he imagined. His death was not random. It was instructional. The restaurant reopened. Life continued. The chair where he sat was replaced. Yet the meaning of that moment lingered. People learned again that visibility can be punished, and that culture itself can be treated as territory. Tito Torbellino did not plan to make a statement with his life. Yet his death became one. It said that songs can be interpreted as choices, and choices can be judged by people who do not offer appeals. Which part of Tito's story troubles you most, the idea that music can be read as loyalty or the fact that everyday places offer no refuge? The next part leaves the ground entirely and moves into the sky, where a celebrated singer's final flight raised questions that still refuse to land. Part 4, Jenny Rivera. Jenny Rivera stood at the top of a world that rarely made space for women. Banda music had long been dominated by men, both on stage and behind the scenes. Jenny broke through that wall with persistence, personality, and a voice that carried pain and authority at the same time. She was not just a singer. She was a symbol of resilience for millions of listeners who saw their own struggles reflected in her story. Her career was built in public. Triumphs and failures unfolded in front of cameras. She spoke openly about survival, about abuse, about rebuilding life after collapse. That honesty created loyalty. Fans did not just listen to her music. They believed her. On the night of her final performance, she appeared unstoppable. The arena was full. The energy was high. She performed for hours, pushing herself beyond exhaustion. Those close to her later described the night as intense but triumphant. Nothing suggested an ending was near. After the show, while most of the city slept, Jenny prepared to leave. A private aircraft waited. It was a common routine for a star of her level. Commercial flights meant exposure, delays, and loss of control. Private travel offered speed and privacy. It felt efficient. It felt safe. The aircraft departed before dawn. Minutes later, contact was lost. What followed shocked even those accustomed to aviation accidents. The plane did not drift or struggle visibly. It dropped with extreme force. The impact left little recognizable structure. Recovery teams described a scene of total destruction. There was no intact fuselage. No clear sequence of mechanical failure that immediately made sense. The official explanation pointed to possible loss of control. Age of the aircraft. Pilot fatigue. Technical uncertainty. These factors were presented as enough to explain the disaster. On paper, the case closed quickly. Public belief did not. Jenny Rivera lived in a world where influence intersects with power. Banda music is not just entertainment. In certain regions, it carries economic and cultural weight. Artists are invited to private events. Some invitations are not optional. Refusing can be interpreted as disrespect. Rumors circulated almost immediately. Claims that Jenny had rejected demands. Stories of pressure behind the scenes. Allegations that her independence had created enemies. None of these claims were proven, yet none disappeared either. The manner of the crash fueled suspicion. The sudden descent. The complete fragmentation. To many observers, it felt less like malfunction and more like certainty. Questions arose about technical interference. About access. About whether private aircraft represent a weak point in celebrity security. Investigators dismissed the idea of deliberate sabotage. No clear evidence of external interference was found. Still, absence of proof did not equal proof of absence. The violence of the impact left little to examine. Destruction erased detail. The lack of recoverable remains deepened the trauma. Families could not grieve in traditional ways. Fans could not say goodbye in physical form. This absence created space for imagination. Conspiracy thrives where closure is denied. Jenny's legacy grew rapidly after her death. Her music climbed charts again. Her image became more powerful. Television projects expanded her story. She transformed from star into myth. Myths do not require certainty. They feed on doubt. Supporters argue that Jenny's strength made her a threat to people who expect obedience. Critics argue that mechanical failure explains everything. Between those positions lies a silence filled with unanswered questions. What remains undeniable is the timing. A peak moment. A successful tour. A future still unfolding. Then nothing. Her death forced a conversation about safety in private aviation. Smaller aircraft operate with fewer safeguards than commercial flights. Maintenance standards vary. Oversight is limited. For celebrities, convenience often overrides caution. It also forced a conversation about the cost of refusing power. In some industries, independence is celebrated. In others, it is punished quietly. Jenny Rivera lived loudly. That visibility may have amplified every conflict around her. Her story continues to divide opinion. Accident or orchestration? Tragedy or warning? Each listener chooses a conclusion based on belief, not evidence. Jenny Rivera became more than an artist. She became a question suspended in the air. Her final flight turned her into a legend whose ending resists resolution. Which explanation feels more convincing to you, coincidence shaped by risk or intent hidden behind silence? The next part leaves the sky behind and returns to the ground, where a singer denied his own death only hours before fate proved him wrong. Part 5, Sergio Vega. Sergio Vega lived inside a contradiction. His music spoke about danger, loyalty, and survival, yet his public persona projected calm confidence. Fans knew him as a charismatic performer who smiled easily and dismissed fear with humor. That confidence would become part of the tragedy. Rumors of his death began spreading early in the day. News outlets repeated unverified claims. Social media filled with messages of shock and grief. Friends and family were confused. Sergio was alive, awake, and watching his own death circulate online. Instead of hiding, he chose visibility. He gave an interview. His voice was steady. He laughed off the rumors. He said he was safe. He said people exaggerated. He framed the situation as another false alarm in a career full of noise. The intention was reassurance. The effect was exposure. By speaking publicly, Sergio confirmed two things at once. He confirmed he was alive. He also confirmed where he was headed. The afternoon sun reflected off the highway. Sergio drove a bright red Cadillac, a symbol of success and status. In quieter places, the car would be admired. On that road, it acted like a signal. It was recognizable from a distance. Impossible to confuse with anything else. Traffic moved as usual. Ordinary drivers followed routine paths. Nothing looked staged. Yet behind him, another vehicle closed the distance. At first it felt like coincidence. Then it became clear it was not. What followed unfolded in motion. No ambush from the shadows. No quiet corner. Just speed, noise, and panic under open sky. The chase did not happen in isolation. Other cars were present. Witnesses were forced into proximity with fear they did not choose. Sergio tried to escape. He accelerated. The Cadillac swerved between lanes. Control narrowed. Adrenaline replaced strategy. In moments like that, experience matters less than circumstance. The pursuit ended violently. The car left the roadway. Metal twisted. Glass shattered. The vehicle came to rest away from the flow of traffic, exposed and still. That should have been the end. An accident scene. Sirens. Help. Instead, it became something else. The attackers approached. There was no confusion about identity. No hesitation. What followed was deliberate and final. Sergio Vega's life ended on the side of the road, hours after he had told the world he was alive. The timing was cruelly precise. Morning denial. Afternoon confirmation of the opposite. The rumor had not been wrong. It had been early. This sequence created a chilling interpretation. The rumor itself may not have been accidental. In environments shaped by intimidation, information can be used as pressure. A false report can force movement. Movement reveals location. Location enables action. Sergio may have believed that confronting the rumor would weaken it. Instead, it may have strengthened it. By stepping into the light, he removed uncertainty for people who needed clarity. His death reinforced an unspoken rule. Silence is sometimes the only defense. Speaking can be mistaken for confidence. Confidence can be read as defiance. The reaction was immediate. Fans struggled to understand how someone could deny their own death and then lose their life within the same day. The emotional whiplash left many numb. Reality felt staged. Like a script written too tightly to be coincidence. Investigations followed familiar patterns. Limited witnesses. Reluctant statements. No clear conclusions. The case faded into the background of a larger conflict that rarely delivers closure. Sergio Vega's story became a symbol of inevitability. Not because he lacked caution, but because he trusted logic in a world governed by message and power. He believed facts could defeat narrative. That belief cost him time he did not have. His music gained a darker echo. Lyrics about fate and pressure sounded less metaphorical. Listeners began hearing prophecy where they once heard performance. The image of the red Cadillac remained. A moving target. A reminder that success can make anonymity impossible. The brighter the symbol, the easier it is to follow. Sergio was not taken by surprise in the traditional sense. The warning arrived publicly. Everyone saw it. The difference was that no one understood it as a countdown. His death teaches a quiet lesson. In some environments, denying danger does not remove it. It clarifies it. Rumors can function as weapons. They shape behavior. They push people into motion. When power listens, even false words carry consequences. Sergio Vega did not intend to challenge anyone that day. He intended to calm his audience. Instead, his voice became the final marker in a timeline that had already been drawn. Which moment in Sergio Vega's story feels most disturbing to you, the rumor itself or the speed at which it became reality? The next part moves to a different kind of betrayal, where a community hero believed he was safest among his own people and paid the highest price for that trust. Part 6, Nipsey Hussle. Nipsey Hussle represented a version of success that refused distance. He did not escape and forget. He returned, invested, and stayed visible. His story was built on self-direction, ownership, and patience. He spoke about long games, not fast wins. For many, he embodied proof that growth could come without abandoning roots. The Marathon store was not just a shop. It was a statement. He bought back property in the neighborhood where he grew up. He hired locally. He created a place that felt open, familiar, and proud. People saw it as protection through presence. If you stand with your community, the community stands with you. That belief shaped how he moved. He avoided heavy security. He greeted people. He took photos. He trusted familiarity more than barriers. In his mind, the danger had passed because the work had changed the environment. The day everything ended began without tension. A normal afternoon. Sunlight. People coming and going. Nipsey stood outside his store, interacting casually. The setting felt safe because it was known. A man approached who was not a stranger. A face from the same world. Someone who had passed through similar spaces. They spoke briefly. The exchange appeared calm on the surface. Words were short. No crowd formed. No argument escalated. The content of that conversation mattered deeply. In street culture, reputation outweighs explanation. A suggestion of cooperation with authorities, even without proof, carries permanent weight. Being labeled an informer is treated as unforgivable. Nipsey reportedly raised that issue, not as a threat, but as advice. A warning meant to protect. The intention did not matter. The message landed as humiliation. The men walked away. For a moment, the space returned to normal. That pause is important. It separated impulse from decision. What happened next was not a sudden reaction. It was chosen. He returned. The shots came quickly. Chaos replaced calm. Nipsey fell where he had stood moments earlier. The violence was not distant. It was personal. A final act added insult to injury, emphasizing anger rather than necessity. The attacker fled. The scene froze. People ran to help. Sirens followed. But the outcome was already sealed. This was not a clash between rival groups. It was not an organized hit ordered from above. It was a rupture driven by pride, accusation, and wounded identity. That is what made it so devastating. The man responsible was later arrested and convicted. The legal process reached a conclusion. Yet justice felt incomplete. A life dedicated to building had been ended by a moment of rage. The community responded with grief that spread far beyond the neighborhood. Vigils formed. Murals appeared. Streets filled with people who understood what had been lost. Nipsey was not just a musician. He was a mentor. An example. A bridge between past damage and future possibility. His death exposed a painful contradiction. Doing good does not guarantee safety. Being present does not neutralize resentment. In some cases, success within the same space can intensify comparison. Comparison breeds envy. Envy seeks justification. Nipsey believed openness could heal wounds. He believed conversation could defuse conflict. In many cases, that belief served him well. In this case, it did not. The accusation that triggered the event revealed something deeper. A culture that values silence over accountability creates conditions where words can become lethal. A single label can override years of contribution. After his passing, initiatives he supported continued. Businesses stayed open. Projects moved forward. The phrase he championed became a rallying cry. The work did not stop. But the voice guiding it was gone. Listening to his music after that day changed the experience. Lines about patience, opposition, and endurance sounded heavier. They felt earned. They felt final. Nipsey Hussle showed what reinvestment looks like. He also showed its limits. You can change structures. You can offer opportunity. You cannot control every response to your presence. His story forces a hard question. Is it possible to transform a place while remaining fully inside it? Or does survival require distance that feels like betrayal? The Marathon store remains a symbol. Not only of success, but of vulnerability. A reminder that proximity cuts both ways. Nipsey did not die because he lacked awareness. He died because he believed trust could replace protection. That belief was generous. It was also dangerous. His life continues to influence people far beyond the street where it ended. His death continues to challenge assumptions about loyalty, progress, and safety. Which part of Nipsey Hussle's story stays with you most, his commitment to stay or the price he paid for it? The next part moves into a crowded music festival where security was supposed to be absolute and proved to be anything but. Part 7, Drakeo the Ruler. Drakeo the Ruler walked out of the courtroom believing the hardest fight was behind him. He had survived years of pressure from the justice system. Charges built from association, lyrics, and reputation collapsed under scrutiny. He regained his freedom with the confidence of someone who had beaten an invisible machine designed to keep him contained. For him, release meant vindication. That victory carried symbolism. He was not only free. He was validated. His voice, once treated as evidence, was now protected speech. His name returned to lineups. His presence was welcomed back into public spaces. The stage opened again. The music festival represented safety through scale. Large crowds. Corporate planning. Barriers. Credential checks. The backstage area, especially the artist zone, was designed to be insulated from chaos. This space existed to protect performers from the unpredictability of crowds. Drakeo arrived believing that protection was guaranteed by infrastructure. Wristbands. Guards. Cameras. Controlled entry points. Layers of oversight. Everything suggested distance from danger. The illusion lasted until it collapsed. The crowd backstage shifted without warning. A group surged forward. Not fans. Not staff. A coordinated presence that did not belong there. People wearing the same color moved with purpose. The number overwhelmed the space. What was meant to be exclusive turned porous in seconds. Security failed to respond fast enough. Or could not. Or did not understand what was happening until it was already finished. Control vanished under the weight of bodies pressing forward. In the confusion, Drakeo was surrounded. The attack was not loud in the way people expect. It was close. Physical. Brief. A blade appeared. One movement changed everything. The crowd absorbed the moment, then released it, leaving aftermath behind. Emergency response followed, but time had already been taken away. Drakeo was transported with urgency, yet the outcome was irreversible. He had survived confinement only to lose his life in a place designed to shield him. The shock spread quickly. Fans struggled to process how a secure artist area could be breached so easily. Industry figures questioned protocols. Families demanded answers. The festival shut down, but closure did not follow. The failure was systemic. This was not a lone individual slipping through unnoticed. It was a mass movement through barriers that should have stopped it. That reality raised uncomfortable questions about responsibility. How did a large group gain access? Who checked credentials? Who looked away? Who underestimated intent? These questions formed the foundation of legal action that followed. Dracio's family filed a civil case alleging negligence. They argued that the environment promised safety and delivered exposure. That failure transformed an event into a danger zone. The case did not bring him back. It sought accountability. The presence of coordinated colors added another layer. In certain contexts, color communicates allegiance. Wearing it publicly sends a signal. In this case, the signal was not subtle. It was meant to be seen. A message delivered in front of peers and cameras. Dracio's death carried symbolism beyond the personal. He had beaten the law. He had returned to the stage. Yet none of that mattered when faced with collective hostility. Legal freedom did not translate into physical safety. His story highlights a harsh truth. Protection on paper does not stop group violence. Barriers fail when intent overwhelms design. Law cannot shield against numbers moving with purpose. Dracio was an innovator. His style challenged expectations. His language bent rhythm and meaning. He was not universally embraced, but he was unmistakably original. That originality created admiration and opposition in equal measure. The irony remains sharp. The system once tried to silence him through incarceration. He survived that attempt. Then he was silenced in a space meant to celebrate his return. Public reaction mixed grief with anger. Many asked why artists are required to navigate hostility even after compliance with the law. Others questioned whether festivals can truly guarantee safety in environments shaped by rivalry. The investigation faced obstacles. Many people were present. Few spoke. Movement was chaotic. Identifying individual responsibility inside a mass proved difficult. Justice slowed. Dracio's legacy changed instantly. His music took on new weight. Lyrics about survival and pressure felt less abstract. They sounded like records of lived experience rather than performance. The lesson is uncomfortable. Freedom from institutions does not equal freedom from consequences shaped by culture. Group violence does not respect legal outcomes. It operates on its own logic. Backstage areas once symbolized sanctuary. Dracio's death shattered that assumption. Artists now question proximity. Distance feels safer than access. He did not die in isolation. He died surrounded. That detail remains haunting. The crowd that should have protected him became cover for the act that ended his life. Dracio the ruler left behind work that refuses to soften. His story forces a confrontation with the limits of safety in public celebration. It shows how quickly security theater collapses under pressure. Which detail unsettles you most, the breach itself or how normal the space was meant to feel? The next part shifts to a hometown club where familiarity becomes the deadliest element of all. Part 8, Doughboy B. Doughboy B carried survival on his face. The eye patch was not a fashion choice or branding strategy. It was a reminder of a previous attempt on his life. He had been injured before and lived. That experience changed how people saw him and how he saw himself. Survival became part of his identity. For many around him, the eye patch symbolized resilience. Proof that he could take a hit and keep moving. In street culture, surviving an attack often creates an illusion of invincibility. The idea that fate has already chosen you to continue. Doughboy B wore that belief quietly, but it followed him everywhere. His career was rising. Industry support grew stronger. His sound traveled beyond local borders. He represented a hometown success story. Someone who made it out without forgetting where he came from. That connection pulled him back. Returning home felt natural. Celebratory. A chance to reconnect. A club appearance meant joy, recognition, and familiarity. Friends. Faces known since childhood. A packed room filled with energy. Loud music. Dim lights. Movement everywhere. The environment felt alive and uncontrolled at the same time. Nightclubs compress emotion into tight spaces. Joy, jealousy, and tension coexist without separation. In those rooms, history walks freely among strangers. Doughboy B entered as a guest of honor. Applause followed. Phones came out. The mood was festive. Nothing suggested danger beyond the usual risks of a crowded venue. Somewhere in that same space stood people who did not see celebration. They saw comparison. Old grievances do not fade just because success arrives. Familiarity can turn into entitlement. Entitlement can turn into resentment. The person responsible was not unknown. The threat did not come from outside the city or from a faceless figure. It came from someone who shared geography, language, and memory. That closeness made the moment more volatile. The sound that shattered the night was sudden. Panic replaced rhythm. In a confined space, chaos spreads instantly. There is no distance to create safety. Bodies move without direction. Fear multiplies. Doughboy B was struck. The eye patch that once symbolized survival could not protect him this time. The same environment that celebrated him became the place where his life ended. The tragedy did not stop with him. Others were injured. Innocent people who came to enjoy music were caught in something they never agreed to be part of. Their lives were altered in seconds. Families outside the scene would learn that a night out had become irreversible loss. Attention shifted quickly to responsibility. How weapons entered the venue. What checks were missing. Whether the location had ignored warning signs. Questions formed before answers existed. The club had a history. Past incidents. Complaints. The city eventually responded with closure. Doors shut. Signs removed. But closing a building does not repair damage already done. Doughboy B's death exposed a familiar pattern. Artists return home believing recognition will replace risk. The city celebrates them publicly but fails to protect them privately. Infrastructure lags behind emotion. Security inside small venues is often symbolic rather than effective. Limited staff. Minimal screening. An assumption that familiarity equals safety. That assumption breaks easily. The loss resonated deeply because it felt preventable. Doughboy B had already paid a price once. He had survived. That survival should have been a warning. Instead, it became a myth. His music took on a heavier tone after his death. Fans heard ambition mixed with urgency. The sense of borrowed time became clearer. His story became another example of potential cut short. The city mourned him loudly. Memorials formed. Tributes filled walls and feeds. Yet mourning arrived too late to matter. This case forces a difficult question. Should artists avoid returning to the spaces that shaped them? Or should cities be responsible for protecting their own success stories? Doughboy B wanted to celebrate progress without distance. That choice cost him his life. The space that cheered him could not shield him from the past walking beside him. Surviving once does not guarantee survival again. The streets do not respect patterns. They react to moments. His death stands as a warning about closed spaces filled with unresolved history. It shows how quickly celebration can collapse when old tensions remain untreated. Which element of Doughboy B's story feels most tragic to you, the belief that he had already beaten fate or the fact that familiar places offered no protection? The next part moves from the club to the studio, where a place meant for creation becomes a battlefield shaped by friendship turned hostile. Part 9, Bankroll Fresh. Bankroll Fresh was not just another rapper in Atlanta. He was a presence. A connector. Someone who moved easily between artists, producers, and neighborhoods. His energy defined a moment in the trap scene when ambition felt local and reachable. People did not just listen to his music. They felt like they knew him. For Bankroll Fresh, the recording studio was sacred ground. It was where disputes were supposed to dissolve into creativity. Where egos turned into verses. In that world, the studio functioned like a church. You brought your problems to the door, then left them outside. That belief did not survive the night everything collapsed. The conflict began with familiarity. A childhood friend. Someone who shared history, not just geography. Time had changed their relationship. Success creates distance. Distance creates comparison. Comparison often turns into resentment. The disagreement was not extraordinary. Words were exchanged. Tension rose. Security intervened and removed the other men from the building. In many situations, that would have ended the night. A boundary drawn. A door closed. But pride does not accept removal quietly. Instead of leaving the area, the men waited. That pause transformed argument into decision. Outside the studio, the conflict grew heavier. Inside, music continued. People assumed the danger had passed. Bankroll Fresh made a choice that would define everything that followed. He stepped outside. He did not stay behind locked doors. He did not let distance cool the moment. He carried his pride with him into the open. The situation escalated beyond control. What followed was not a brief exchange. It was sustained chaos. Sound filled the space. Walls were struck. Equipment shattered. Panic replaced order. The studio lost its identity as a place of creation and became something else entirely. When the noise stopped, the damage was impossible to ignore. Dozens of shell casings covered the ground. Evidence of how far the situation had spiraled. Bankroll Fresh lay inside the studio, wounded beyond recovery. The place where he built his future became the place where it ended. Authorities arrived to a scene that looked more like a war zone than a workplace. Questions followed quickly. Who initiated? Who escalated? Who was responsible? The legal conclusion focused on technicalities. The men who fired the fatal shots claimed self-defense. Investigators accepted that explanation. Charges were not pursued. The law treated the event as mutual confrontation rather than calculated harm. For many, that outcome felt hollow. The idea that a space filled with so many people, so much firepower, and so much destruction could end without accountability left a bitter taste. Legal resolution did not equal moral closure. Bankroll Fresh's death forced a hard look at how pride operates in environments saturated with weapons and reputation. Walking away is often framed as weakness. Staying becomes a test of identity. That test can be lethal. The tragedy also exposed how studios function without true security. Friends come and go. Entourages grow. Boundaries blur. Personal history enters professional space. When conflict arises, there is rarely a plan. Atlanta mourned deeply. Tributes poured in. Artists spoke about loss and regret. The studio, once a hub, carried a permanent stain. Music continued, but something had shifted. Listening to Bankroll Fresh after his death felt different. His lyrics about struggle and survival gained weight. His confidence sounded like urgency. His ambition felt unfinished. His story highlights a recurring danger. The people who know you best often know how to provoke you most effectively. Familiarity provides access. Access removes caution. Bankroll Fresh did not lose his life to a stranger. He lost it to history that had never been resolved. The past followed him into a room meant for progress. The concept of self-defense remains debated. Was it survival? Was it escalation? Or was it a system that allows pride to masquerade as necessity? Those questions remain open. What is clear is that no one won. A life ended. Careers paused. Families grieved. A community lost a voice that shaped its sound. The studio should have been a refuge. It became a reminder that creative spaces are only as safe as the egos inside them. When boundaries collapse, music cannot protect anyone. Bankroll Fresh's death stands as a lesson about restraint. About the cost of stepping outside when staying inside might save everything. About how pride can act as an invisible trigger. His name remains tied to a moment when Atlanta lost more than a rapper. It lost a reminder that survival sometimes means retreat. Which part of Bankroll Fresh's story troubles you most, the legal outcome or the moment when pride refused to step back? The final part moves to a city far from the spotlight, where a rising voice was silenced on the same day the world was looking somewhere else. Part 10, Jimmy Wopo. Jimmy Wopo ruled a city most of the music world ignored. Pittsburgh did not sit at the center of industry attention, but inside its neighborhoods, his voice carried weight. He was not chasing trends. He was documenting an environment shaped by loyalty, pressure, and constant watchfulness. For local listeners, he was not a rapper trying to become something else. He was already their representative. His rise was steady rather than explosive. Street credibility came first, then views, then wider recognition. Bigger artists noticed. Conversations about major opportunities began to feel real. The next step was no longer a dream. It was scheduled. At the same time, his visibility created another problem. Influence inside a confined ecosystem rarely goes unnoticed. Power draws attention not only from supporters but from rivals who see expansion as threat. In some cases, danger does not fade when someone prepares to leave. It intensifies. There were indications that Jimmy Wopo was being monitored. Not casually. Intentionally. Information flowed from places meant to contain it. Even confinement could not fully silence communication. In environments built on hierarchy, instructions do not stop at walls. Jimmy understood the risk. His lyrics reflected awareness. He spoke about movement, timing, and paranoia. Yet preparation does not always prevent outcome. Sometimes it simply delays it. The day everything ended did not begin with alarm. It was ordinary. Afternoon traffic. Familiar streets. Routine movement. He was in a vehicle, waiting at a red light like everyone else around him. No chase. No warning. Just a pause dictated by city rhythm. Another vehicle approached. The moment passed quickly. There was no exchange. No visible escalation. The attack came without signal. Drivers nearby did not have time to react. Chaos replaced routine in seconds. Jimmy Wopo was injured and rushed for help. Efforts were made. Speed mattered. But the damage was beyond recovery. He died later that day, far from cameras, far from headlines. The timing was cruel. On that same day, the music world focused on the loss of a global star elsewhere. News cycles filled instantly. Social feeds overflowed. Coverage became singular. There was no space left for another name. Jimmy Wopo's death passed quietly through media channels. A local headline. A brief mention. Then silence. His life ended in public, but his story remained local. For his family and community, the contrast was devastating. Grief unfolded while the world looked away. The message felt unavoidable. Fame determines visibility. Visibility determines memory. His death later appeared in court documents connected to wider investigations. It became part of a larger pattern. Not random. Not impulsive. Structured. Coordinated. Ordered from distance. This detail reinforced what many already suspected. Jimmy was not taken because of a momentary dispute. He was taken because he occupied a position. Removing him altered balance. In places where power is fragile, elimination becomes strategy. The injustice extended beyond the act itself. Recognition arrived too late. By the time broader audiences learned his name, his voice was already gone. His music became an archive instead of a future. Listeners who discovered him afterward heard intensity without resolution. Tracks sounded urgent. Lines about escape felt unfinished. His catalog carried the weight of potential interrupted. Jimmy Wopo's story highlights a harsh reality. Cultural impact does not guarantee protection. Local kings can fall without notice if the spotlight points elsewhere. Value is often measured by reach rather than substance. He was not less talented because fewer people knew him. He was not less important because his death shared a date with a larger story. Yet attention follows hierarchy, not fairness. The silence around his passing became part of the tragedy. A reminder that many lives are lost without acknowledgement beyond their immediate circles. The industry mourned selectively. Pittsburgh felt the loss deeply. Murals appeared. Tributes spread through neighborhoods. His name remained present where it mattered most. Outside those borders, his story struggled to travel. Jimmy Wopo did not fail to escape. He was intercepted. The difference matters. His plans did not protect him because the system watching him moved faster. His death asks an uncomfortable question. How many rising voices disappear without record because they fall outside the frame of global attention? How many stories end without echo? He died not because he lacked ambition, but because he had it. He became important enough to be noticed by people who respond to growth with removal. Jimmy Wopo's legacy lives quietly. Not through headlines, but through memory carried by those who understood his environment. He remains a symbol of how unevenly tragedy is distributed. Which part of Jimmy Wopo's story stays with you most, the precision of the attack or the silence that followed? The series may end here, but the pattern continues, and every story before this one points toward how easily another name could be next.